first I'm going to start on YouTube, and then I'll actually get broadcast on Zoom. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, and broadcast.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today for this version of Kickbox Live. We are going to wait here a few moments to ensure as many people can join as possible. We should have a really great turnout, and we're so grateful for you guys to participate with us in this. Just a couple of things to let you know of. We will have a poll question, just one, and it's going to be very exciting. But when that pops up, we'd love for you guys to answer it as much as you can. That would be wonderful. We will also be taking questions throughout the presentation and do our best to answer those. And if we can't answer them during the presentation, we'll certainly answer them after. But in order to ask a question, simply click on the Q&A button and fire away. I've got Brian Damon, who is off camera, but he is joining us today here at the Kickbox headquarters. And he'll be fielding those questions and providing those questions to John and myself as we go through this process. So again, thank you so much for joining. Let's take a few more minutes to allow other folks to join. And in the meantime, if you can let us know where you're from, that would be great. Just feel free to make comments, and Brian will see that, and we'll kind of convey to everyone where folks are coming from. So thanks so much as we wait a few more moments.
Austin, Texas. Hey.
Right on. Welcome, Austin.
Charlotte, North Carolina. Raise up. Beautiful.
Didn't you just move here from Charlotte?
From Raleigh.
Ah, Raleigh. Close enough.
Awesome state, though.
That's awesome. So we've got Charlotte, we have Austin. We're in Dallas, Texas. That's where we're headquartered. I know John is in Denver, Colorado. So we're representing the world well so far.
Oh, Mazatlan.
Mazatlan. I'd like perfect for your background. Are you in Mazatlan,
right?
John?
Like, yeah, I think so.
So funny. It's so funny. That's awesome. All right, so I think we're ready to commence. We're going to head off. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we're thankful that you're here. My name is Jack Wrigley, and I'm the VP of Business Development for Kickbox. We're joined today by our good pal and good friend, John Thies, who's the CEO, co-founder of Email on Acid. John, thanks so much for joining us and participating in this great webinar extravaganza.
I'm excited. Thanks for inviting me, Jack. It's always great to talk to you. Like, even if it's a webinar or anywhere else at a conference, I always enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Your check is in the mail. No, I appreciate that a lot. And just so you guys know, a lot of times these webinars are kind of rehashing old stuff and, kind of hearing things again for probably the 100th time. And we try to keep these things lively and moving along. But I do know that I'm pretty excited with regard to a few of the slides that John's going to be talking about today with regard to accessibility for people that might have some disabilities. So I'm anxious to hear kind of your take on that and how to build campaigns for that. So really looking forward to that, John.
Look forward to talking about it. Hopefully you'll get some good takeaways from it.
That's awesome. So obviously today's webinar is all about what causes email anxiety. And I know that even for us who's been in this industry, when we're building email campaigns to send out to our customers, there's always anxiety around that. And John, I know that you see that all of the time based on obviously what Email on Acid does. And I'm sure your customer base is, clearly anxious before they hit that send button.
Well, absolutely, because there's that finality of it. It's the whole point of once you send it, you can't get it back. And so there's like there's a finality to the email you send. I'm not trying to over exemplify it, but it's true. I mean, you can't say, oh, oops, I didn't mean to send that.
Right.
And then try to go retract it back. There's a like there's this, it's just like, hey, once you send it, it's out. And as you think about it too, like as powerful as email is, it's really important to get that right.
Yeah, and it never fails the moment that you send something out, even if you've done your best job at trying to find all of those little things to fix. There's always somebody that will chime in and go, oh, you misspelled this, or that link doesn't work, or blah, 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 right? So there's always the kind of those people out on the bench that are like firing off at you after, you've hit send. So email anxiety is real, and we hope to at least discuss a few things today that you can be mindful of. And I think most importantly, just remember that it's real for everybody. So don't feel like anxiety around sending email is specific to your situation. Everybody experiences it, even the most savvy email senders out there. So look forward to kind of moving through this and talking about a few things here. So what can cause email anxiety? We've asked this question of our customers before. John, I know that you've asked this question and heard the response from your customer before. And these are some of the basic things that we want to talk about today. But those are, lack of process, poor communication around deliverables, lack of list verification, which is obviously near and dear to our heart, no campaign QA process, setup challenges. Oh my gosh, I hear that all the time, whether, with regard to the ESP or the CRM that's being used. And then just that finality of sending. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to hit send. These are things, John, that we hear, and I'm pretty confident that you hear these as well, just based on the conversations that you and I have had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I think these are absolutely it. You think about all the things that are involved with developing a campaign. When you talk about, poor communication around deliverables, you have multiple teams. You might have legal, you might have creative, you might have marketing, you might have sales, right? So how do you get all those people together and have that kind of communication so they're streamlined?
Yep.
And then you think about too, like the ESP CRM. That's like kind of dynamic content. When you talk about dynamic content and pulling in merge tags and all this type of stuff, it's like, what are those values? Like, do you know that you have the correct values for all your customers or that segment that you're sending to? Are those values correct? And so, there's just a ton of stuff like that goes into sending email. It's kind of funny. I was actually talking to one of our new colleagues the other day, and they were like, I have no idea how complicated or how complex email is. Like when you dive into it and you're sending these massive campaigns, like I had no idea. And it's like such a learning experience. I can remember 10 years ago getting into this industry too. It's like, oh yeah, we'll get into email, like, and kind of like how EOA started. And then we got into it, like, wow, holy cow, there is so much involved with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think most people that are outside of the industry think that email is still kind of sending a newsletter, right? And, even looking at the ESP CRM setup challenges, the reality is most senders have multiple ESPs. And the coordination of handling all of that is pretty intense. But so based on all of that and based on what you talked about, totally understand why there's anxiety around this.
And then you think about too, like something that's not listed there is how many applications people use to successfully deploy a campaign. They have, Kickbox, they have EOA, they might have, Movable Ink or LiveClicker. They might have, what's that SendTime optimization?
I hate live questions, John.
I'm drawing a blank on it. Man, like I know the guy, it's Paul. Anyway, but there's just so many like different applications out there that, Audience Point, right? So Audience Point is another one. Yes. And so there's just so many applications that are out there that that marketers use to kind of make sure their messages are relevant and on point and all that stuff. And it's complex, man. There's just a lot going on. Yeah.
So that massive technology stack at the end of the day just continues to drive this intense anxiety. And so it's real. And hopefully a few of these little tricks we talk about and a few things we discussed today will help eliminate some of that. But I think, anxiety in terms of sending will always be there. We just hope to find ways to sort of minimize that as much as possible.
And then maybe just get a backdrop like this to put yourself in that Zen spot before you.
There you go. You gave it away though. You're not really on the beach. Is that what you're saying?
No, I wish I was. My
Yeah,
hair would
okay.
be blown a little bit more.
No, that's awesome. So simple solutions to reduce stress and reduce the anxiety. Let's talk about a little bit defining a process with all stakeholders. I know that personally here at Kickbox, while ours may not be as grand in terms of maybe an online retailer, sending email and things of that nature, it's still really important to work with all the stakeholders, 2 or 3 of us, whether that's Brian or Jessica or myself or whatever that might be, engineering, and kind of get everybody on board with regard to what it is we're doing so nobody is caught by surprise. You probably experienced this at a greater depth with some of your customers, and I'd love for you to just chat about, the importance of, defining a process with stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's key because then, like, as you have that process, like everyone knows what job to be done, right? Like everyone knows the job that they need to do to have a successful campaign, and then you can kind of you can manage to that. Right. But if there's no process, you can't manage to it. Like I know here, at EOA, we have, a whole process where it's like multiple reviews.
Right.
We have a campaign calendar, right? So that's part of that process. Okay, what's coming up? And then when they see what's coming up, it's like, what's my role in that? We use a project management tool, Asana, to kind of help us with that. The marketing team uses it so that they know, hey, this is when the email developers get involved. This is when copyright gets involved. This is when sale, and then this is when we go and we give it to the deployment team. Now, we don't have a massive deployment team. It's one person, but they each know what their role is and what their deliverable and what their time frame is within that. So I think, and also from my perspective too, is that once I know the process, then I'm comfortable at my level, that's a CEO level, understanding, yep, my team has it under control. They know what they're doing. And if something goes wrong, we say, okay, well, what happened in the process? Do we need to adjust the process to account for this thing now? Or was it just someone just made a mistake? And that can happen too, right?
Sure. Yes, mistakes happen all the time. When I hear define a process, to me, what it also means is eliminate the unknown. By defining a process, you try to identify all of the known pieces of whatever it is you're trying to deploy, and by eliminating the unknown, chances are your anxiety level will come down, and most importantly, you'll probably have a very effective campaign and a great send process. So as part of that, defining the process, obviously communicating timelines. You touched on it just a moment ago with regard to using Asana and things of that nature, which is a great tool. Not a big advertisement for Asana, but if you haven't used it, try it because it's pretty badass. But communicating timelines with all departments is so important. Again, kind of eliminating that unknown. It's like, this is when we need to have this done, whether it's creative or whether it's legal, etc. But what can you add to that?
Not much than what I just said. I mean, I can add something. They have to get buy-in from those teams too.
Oh, that's actually really important.
You have to get buy-in and have them understand why this process is in place and why it's so critical that they need to be informed to be successful. Now, you could show numbers, you could do all this stuff, but I think you really need to get buy-in to say, yep, the department lead of the legal team or content or creative needs to understand why it's so important when these requests come down or why it's on their calendar. Why it's there and the reason behind it, so that they're not saying, oh, and brush it off and say, no, that's not important. And so I really think from a marketer so from a marketer perspective, like really show them the importance and how email drives and how email can impact their organization, how it helps everyone.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. And I can't stress enough that if you have a legal process to go through, communicating timelines, not only to legal, but to other departments around legal is so key, because oftentimes it's one of the biggest juggernauts to get through. And that's not anything against the legal teams, because they have their hands full and they're doing their own thing as well. But really important, the communication piece. Testing for email rendering issues. I can't, this is, even though this is kind of falling into your process. Just a moment. I just have a little bit of an issue here. Sorry about this, you guys. All right. Well, we'll just keep kind of going
I can
here.
still see it. It's just smaller.
Okay. Very, very good. Thank you. So in any event, what's important, let me see here. There we go. Test for email rendering issues. Obviously, this is something that is near and dear to your heart, I'm sure. But I can't tell you how many times I've received an email and it's wonky. And again, I try very hard not to, complain or cause any, like point fingers. But I think a lot of that can be easily addressed by, technology such as yourself. And again, that's just an opportunity to sort of reduce that anxiety level.
It is. And so, well, I think this one for us, it's more education. And because like I mentioned earlier, like email is very complex, I'll just say. And so a lot of times what we do is just educate our customers on what they're, on the outcome and like why like every email client displays emails differently. And just knowing that, and then that's where we kind of fit into that process. And I'll go in more into that a little bit later too.
Right. Very good. Eliminate deliverability concerns with email verification. Obviously, that's our sweet spot. And I can't tell you how many times that just the simple task of determining whether or not an email address is deliverable and the dropping of anxiety, knowing that you've done everything you can to ensure, the deliverability of the campaign that you've spent so much time on. It's such a simple step to do. It's very cost effective, and we'll get into that here in a moment. But it's certainly something that we see, all the time in terms of, reducing that anxiety level through, just making sure an email address is deliverable. And you probably, see that on your side from customers that are ready to hit send, and then that probably comes up, I'm assuming.
Oh, it totally does, right? I mean, and when you talk about deliverability, there's so much involved with that, right? Like,
oh yeah,
like email verification is a big piece of that as well.
Yeah, certainly not the entire piece, but it is certainly an integral piece.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about list verification, a little closer look, and just kind of give a few reasons as to why, what it does and why it's important. Clearly, I mean, this should be no big news shocker to anybody, but the only useful email address is a valid one. If you are in the process of collecting email addresses off of forms, or however you obtain your email data, assuming it's all opt-in and things of that nature, it's important to really try to maintain a valid email address. And oops, hang on just a moment. I think we just
there you go. It's back.
All right, there we go. So the only useful email address is a valid one. I'm sorry, you guys. Thanks so much for bearing with the technology glitch here in Dallas. But it's a very truthful statement, and it's such a simple thing to remedy. Another little data point is that once you've used verification and you have a general sense that your list is highly deliverable, it just, again, it allows you to have this really great confidence in pressing send along with everything else you do to kind of reduce that anxiety. So, why do we recommend you verify? Very simply, it improves email data quality. It's important. Your email list, as you know, and as everybody knows, is gold. And the more you can do to ensure that it is the highest quality possible, the better. And certainly list verification and verifying at the point of capture is an element of that. But what also goes with that is consistent sending and sending relevant email to the people that opt in to receive your message. So while verification is an element, it's not the end all be all, but it certainly does help improve your email data quality over time. It will help with your engagement numbers. The simple truth is, if you have 100 email addresses and 10 of those are undeliverable, if you remove those 10 and only send to 90, then your engagement is going to go up. And if those are important numbers for you, which they should be, it's again a great reason to look at verifying an email address.
And one thing I want to point out too on that engagement is that the largest inbox providers like the Gmail and Microsoft, so Outlook.com or Office 365, they actually track engagement now. They're starting to track engagement. So if they notice that a lot of people are just deleting your email without reading it, or they're just skimming it and reading it, you'll end up more in the spam folder, because what they're doing is saying, hey, of the people that you're sending to, is it relevant to them? Are they engaging in it? Are they clicking on things? If they're not, well, we can put some algorithms around that and say, okay, we're going to predict it spam.
Right.
And so that's definitely not something that you want either, right?
Yeah, for sure. And certainly email verification is an element of that. And that's why well, as a company, we love to stress relevant content wins all of the time. And email verification will certainly help you. But it's not the silver bullet. It's an important process. But to your point, having very compelling, relevant email that people click on and actually open is an important metric. And of course, all of this is all about boosting campaign performance. We are constantly reminded in this industry, about campaign performance and metrics that people use to, determine campaign performance, whether that's clicks or opens, et cetera. All of those things are impacted by whether or not you have a valid email address. It's that simple. It all starts with that valid email address. So email verification continues to be an important piece of this. And of course, at the end of the day, if your email is designed to drive revenue, then it makes sense to send it to people that can actually buy. A bounced email address, last time I checked, doesn't really buy much. And so it will certainly improve your ROI.
Well, another thing too that we talked about with this, sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of chime in, is when you think about valid email addresses and how ESPs charge, or these CRMs or whatever charge for, they charge you. Like, so we use HubSpot, and they'll charge us for how many people we have on our list, and they'll say, okay, they don't care how many emails we send, it's how many people are on your list.
Right.
And so if you have those bad emails, you're essentially paying for someone that's never going to get that email.
Yeah,
and so you're paying for it. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah, and then it's compounded by the fact that you have sent it, and potentially your reputation starts to take a hit, and it's just a nasty problem. So, again, verification is super simple to use. It's obviously near and dear to our heart, but it does impact everything you do, and it can definitely help reduce your stress, because you'll know that you're sending to a valid email address. So one of the things that we're often chatted about is, do we do list verification or API verification? And just a simple way that we look at it is, typically people will come to us with legacy list data. We'll help them get that, verified and up to snuff and ready to send. And then we'll articulate and educate them around our API, because the API is really the best way to verify an email address at the point of capture. And so we love to talk about, verifying legacy data, but then, to keep you out of the doghouse, to keep your data clean from the inception of collecting it, we highly recommend leveraging technology such as our API. And I'm sure, John, you've seen API usage on forms before, but it's a pretty common practice. It needs to probably be more common, but it's a great tool in your arsenal to, again, ultimately reduce the anxiety level of when you're ready to send an email campaign.
Yeah, I think that, like, the way I look at the API, it's that you're validating data going in instead of having to validate it every time you're going to send a campaign. Now, obviously, things change, right? Lists can, like, mailboxes can fill up, they can go dead, posts, but this is a good way to know that you're getting clean data in your system versus having to go and flush it out later at a later point. Yeah,
absolutely. It's just a great process to do. By the way, just as a little gift so that everybody is aware, you're probably aware of this, but if you're participating in today's webinar, Kickbox is offering you 5,000 free, no strings attached verifications. We encourage you to create a Kickbox account, and from there we will work with you and ensure that you get the 5,000 verifications. That allows you to test the list verification, that allows you to test our API, ask questions, and those are free to you to use. So let's talk about the campaign QA process. And John, this is where I'm going to hand over to you some controls so that you are ready to roll.
Awesome.
Maybe. There we go. Let's see. You should have control now.
Let's see. Whoops. All right, so for me, like, what I just want to kind of talk to you guys about the QA process, remove some of that anxiety that you might have. Because I think, as we've talked about, there's a lot going on with email. And my first thing is just to really kind of define that, that campaign checklist, like a checklist that you can go through and say, yep, did that, did this, did this. Now, The checklist I'm going to go to just in terms of time is not all inclusive, right? Like this is just a subset of those things that I suggest that you guys always do no matter what. Now there's other things in our checklist that's way more extensive. When you talk about reviews, you talk about, you know, getting other departments involved, but this is really just focused on kind of the content of the email. And that's really kind of where EOA sits on that side. So the first one I want to talk about is it's kind of that verification of from name, subject, and preview text. And the way I look at it this way is this is 3 opportunities for you to encourage that subscriber to open that email, to engage with it. And there's so many times where you look at this and like, man, they just missed the boat. They miss an opportunity that you have. Again, if subscriber might be engaged, but as they see kind of some of these things not being utilized, they might not be engaged anymore. So again, I think it's so important. These are things that are really easy to do. And so I'll just kind of start with the from name. And a lot of people ask, okay, what do we use for the from name? Do we use a person at our company or do we use a company name? And what we suggest is you always use a trustworthy and recognizable from name. There is no right or wrong answer whether you use someone's name or a company name. What we do here at EOA is when we send a broad campaign to that's not highly personalized and stuff like that, we use email and acid. Now, if we're sending a transactional email like an order receipt or something that's highly relevant or customized to that individual subscriber, we'll use someone's name like Jeff at email and acid. Just that way, then they start to understand, like our subscribers have started to understand or realize like, hey, okay, this is to me from someone at EOA versus like, hey, this is going out to everyone. So it's kind of something we do. Now, can you change it? Absolutely. But I would say just do A/B tests and don't change it too often. Once you find something that works, keep it consistent because subscribers, we all like consistent things. Just like when you think about from a branding perspective, Coke changed their red to a purple, you'd be like, wait a minute. Something's not jiving here. And so I think from us, from consumers, from subscribers of email, we like consistency and we look for that name. We say, oh, hey, I know that one. I'm gonna open that one. If it's content we're generally interested in. You know, and like subject lines, you know, with subject lines are important. They say 47% of all recipients open emails based on the subject line alone. So it's highly important. It's really important that you get a subject line. And now what I will say from a subject line is you want to make sure it's relevant. You don't want to trick people into saying a different subject line and then you open it something else. That's like one of the worst things that you can do. Right. I know and also too, like when you put in like some trend that I've seen, Jack, I don't know if you've seen this lately, is the RE, like the reply and then the colon.
Yeah.
People are starting to do that now.
Like, making it sound like you've already engaged with it, right?
Yeah, and like it can be so frustrating. And I know that there's a lot of B2B people that do that. Right. I always say just avoid it. Avoid it altogether. Just
one thing that I think is really cool about subject lines, and I know that there are people that kind of talk about this in the industry, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. And that is a subject line can resonate. It's almost like a billboard, right? So if you're driving down the freeway and you see a billboard, it makes an impression. And subject lines oftentimes are really key for making an impression. And even though somebody doesn't necessarily click into that email from that impression, they might go back to it later, or if it's done properly, it will just resonate your brand and what it is you're trying to convey. And I think subject lines in many ways have so much power with regard to email beyond just getting somebody to click on it, but just it's an impression. It's an opportunity for you to do something really cool.
Yep, absolutely. And again, it's being genuine with it too. Right. You know exactly what you said, like be a billboard. Don't lie to them with the first chance you get, right? Because that just creates distrust.
Definitely.
And kind of another concept that we talk about too, and this is actually done by Return Path. So what they do is they have panel data and they can kind of measure and like help people organize their inbox. So in doing that, they can look at data. And so this is what I wanted to talk about is like kind of subject line length. They've been talking about, okay, what's the right subject line? Now, if you look at this, you'll say, okay, so the blue there is average read rate, and then the green is the number of messages sent with that length. And so you can see, okay, well, 61 to 70 gets the highest read rate. But when you think about it though, like if you look at it, I look at it this way, like if there was a set line length that was, then you'd see everyone doing it in the highest engagement. But what really I am so intrigued about this graph is at 0 to 10. No one's doing it, yet it's the second or third highest engagement, like highest read rate.
Right.
That's awesome. So what does this tell you about subject line length? It doesn't mean shit. Like it doesn't matter, right? Because if it did, there would be like a, like a very defined, but it's not. Right. It's all kind of evened out. So what I will say from an anxiety perspective, don't worry too much about your read, about the length of the subject. Just make sure it's on point, it's relevant.
Hey, just with regard to subject line length, is that characters or what's defined? Like 0 to 10, is that 10 characters?
Yeah.
Oh,
these are characters on the bottom. Sorry for not clarifying.
Yeah, no worries. No, that's cool.
But so you probably 0 to 10, they're probably using emojis, right? There's some emoji maybe in that one.
Yeah.
So again, I would just look at emojis, like don't overuse them.
Or just hi. No.
Yeah. Like, hey, you never know, right? But I mean, I think that is so intriguing to me. It's like, what are those messages? And then look at the read rate on those. So again, don't put too much time in the subject line length. Just make sure the subject line is relevant, it's meaningful, and it kind of grabs some attention, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Love that.
And then we go into pre-header text. Whoops. So preview text or pre-header text. And this to me is like, and that's that content that's below the subject line.
Right.
This to me is probably one of the easiest wins that marketers will get when they talk about content and design and sending the campaign. Because what happens, and I'll get to it in the code in a minute and I'll talk about, but it is such an easy win. Like in my world, like this is the easiest thing that you can do because it has zero impact on rendering. Right. But the problem is that because it's hidden, essentially, is that people forget about it. And so you think about, like, look at these missed opportunities. Like, how many times have you got an email where you see that first link, having trouble viewing this email in that space? It's a missed opportunity. And then click here to view this. Like, you're not taking advantage of the space. Right. And then you look at the second one, right? Obviously, this person used a template. And so this is pre-header text. Some clients will show this text as a preview, right?
That's awesome, yeah.
Again, like, and I get it, and we'll talk a little bit more, but my favorite, and I know it's a little bit old, 2015, but Beach Riot, they're asking me kind of to unsubscribe before I even open the email.
Yeah, well, are they still around? They probably
I think so. Yeah, I think Beach Riot's still around.
They probably are.
I'm sure they've cleaned it up since then. But these are the types of things they're just missed opportunities. And so the Beach Riot, what happens is, like, they're obviously a retail, and it's all image based. So what email clients will do is we'll strip out all the HTML in your email, and whatever text is remaining, it puts in that space.
Right.
So for the top one, having trouble viewing this email, that was a link. Click here to view this web page. That's a link, and there's text. So what they do is they strip out all HTML tags and whatever content's left. And so the Beach Riot, they use all images, all
that's
HTML.
At the bottom, right?
Yep, and that's their copyright and their footer. So again, and that can have a role in deliverability as well, right? We're not going to dive too much into that here, but if you guys are interested, hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever, Twitter, and I can totally answer that question for you, or you can answer the question in the QA. But so what it does, like, the easy win is here. All you have to do is put this text in here. Now, it can be a span, it can be a div, whatever. But what happens is, what this will do is, if you put this at the top of your email, like below the body tag, this will essentially show up hidden when they open the email. But as the client strips out HTML, it will use that pre-header text or whatever text is in there at that point. Yep. So again, this from a rendering perspective is a no-brainer. It has zero impact on rendering, but then it gives you the opportunity, and you can even, like, we actually put in hidden messages in our pre-header text. And when we talk about, like, I'll talk about accessibility kind of a little bit, but there's ways you can put hidden message in there so if they see it, that's longer than what actually pre-header text shows. And we've got some really good engagement by it. So it's a way that you can put hidden messages in there and all that type of stuff. So
very cool.
You can definitely, I would definitely suggest, obviously it's really super win, so make sure you're utilizing that space.
Yeah, and I would say that, these things are important. Again, we talk about, preparing for the email send to reduce anxiety and making sure everybody's on board and everybody is marching kind of to the same plan. But things like this also help reduce that anxiety, because what ends up happening is your campaign just gets so much better and the engagement is up. And so rather than being anxious necessarily in a negative way, you get excited because your engagement is going to go up and things of that. So that's why I think these tools are just so handy.
Absolutely. And like if you think about that checklist,
Yep.
you have the checklist, you say, okay, from name, is it recognizable?
Yep.
Did we,
That's
is the
great.
subject, like what is the subject? And then, or, even if you have like you're doing an A/B test, what's the variance and what are the two variances and like how are we going to measure? And then you say, did we check pre-header text? Because this is hidden. When you open the email, you're not going to see it. And so that's why it's really important to have this in that checklist to make sure, hey, did we verify the pre-header text?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good.
Absolutely.
What else you got, John? Keep going.
And with the preview text, you can personalize it, right? So because it's in the HTML, you can use those merge tags. So here's the one from Nashville Ballet. Dear Mary, they're using that merge tag, and they talk about personalization, increase the open rates by 30%. So again, you can think about what you can do in that pre-header text to personalize it, because as ESPs or CRMs go through and they replace that merge tag when they send it out, it's within the HTML, so you can do that.
That's so cool.
That. And here's a great example. This is like the best one I've seen, is where it combines all three of them. And they had fun with it, right? So pet Cataracts, it's a recognizable from name. The subject line is short to the point. It's actually personalized. So the Fenway is the dog's name. And then they had fun with the pre-header text. Who let the dogs out, right? Like I think most of us, well, I might be dating myself, but I think we know that song. I know that the attendees don't want me singing it because you'll see all of the participants drop out.
No, come on, let's do a quick poll. Who wants to see John? No, just
no, not going to happen. I'll get people coming in here. Hey, can you keep it down in there?
Maybe at some conference.
Exactly. I think so. I'll get the mic out and sing it.
Awesome.
Okay, so this is the kind of one that kind of brings it all together and how you can use personalization. I can have fun with it. And obviously, when they open up the email, they're not going to see who let the dogs out. That's kind of that engagement to try to get you to open it.
Right. That's
I don't have the metrics on this one. I would love to know that. But this is one that I kind of see really brings them all together.
And just as a side note, that picture right there, I could leave that up all day because
maybe I should have put that as my backdrop, right?
Dude, those dogs are just having a blast. So cool.
Awesome. So then we get into, so then annotations, right? Gmail came out. There's another way kind of from a preview perspective. So Gmail late last year came out with annotations. So those emails that land into the promotions tab, they did it for a number of reasons. One, to say, hey, yes, we want people to turn on promotions, but then also to give marketers the ability to kind of highlight their message within that. Because they got a lot of complaints like, hey, how do we get out of the promotions tab? And so Gmail is kind of playing to both sides, but it's really kind of a cool feature of how they do it. You can put in a banner image there. You can have like coupon codes. You can have you can put a time constraint on it. So when you talk about kind of the when marketers and kind of the human behavior, like when there's a expiration date, it kind of increases engagement. Right. So they allow you to do that, and they put 70% off. All these types of things. And there's tools out there. EOA has one on our site, that will help walk you through kind of how to set your email up with the promotions tab. You just add some code snippets in there, and you're good to go. Now, I will tell you though that Gmail right now, they only take the top 4 emails in that promotions tab and display this. So you're not guaranteed to have this displayed. Yep. However, what I will tell people is I would do it anyway, because what if you are selected to be one of those 4? You're missing an opportunity. It doesn't take that long to set that up within your campaign. Yep. So again, you talk about putting your best foot forward. You don't know when and where your subscribers are opening, but when they do, you want to put your best foot forward. Give yourself every opportunity to maximize the engagement, the ROI on these campaigns.
Yeah, for sure.
The same thing can go true for text-only version, right? You can't track it. People do it, but if it's not right, are you missing an opportunity?
Yeah. And you might as well just take care of that in the beginning, because again, it's just one less thing to be concerned with, and it's an opportunity that you get as you hit send.
Yep. And so again, I put all this stuff in that checklist, and that's why this checklist is so important.
Yeah. So great.
So accessibility. So I know Brian's going to put up a poll.
Yeah, we got an accessibility poll.
Yes. So what I like you guys to do is answer this for me before I dig into this. Do you take an active approach to ensure your campaigns are accessible? And I just love to hear. We'll share the results with everyone on what their answer is.
And just for clarity, do you want to explain just high level what accessibility means?
Yeah, so it's making sure, like, and I'll get into this more too, but it's making sure that those with some type of visual, physical type of impairment can engage with your email.
So freaking cool. This is what I loved about what we're going to talk about. So,
and it's very near dear to my heart. So I think this is where the education comes in, and this people like, oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Right. Oh yeah, gosh, so cool.
So
how we looking, Brian?
Yeah.
Are we good? Nice.
A few more seconds.
A few more seconds, and we can move on. Very exciting. Thanks for all the responses, everybody. It's really cool.
All right, cutting it off.
All right, move on, John.
All right, so so 21% say yes, 39% say no, and 39% say sometimes. So what my goal is here, so awesome, thank you 21% people, thank you so much for doing it. It's incredibly important that we do. And those that said no and sometimes, I hope you get some learns from this so that the next campaigns or any future campaigns that you do, you kind of be mindful of it. And I have some tips and stuff that you guys can do to kind of go through that. Let's see. Is it moving?
Poll is off, and I think you can continue. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So jumping into accessibility. Now I get it. You know, it might not be the sexiest topics to discuss.
Wow.
You know, and so just kind of go, and I might actually leave this slide up for the rest of the presentation. I'm just kidding. There's actually a rumor, like when I did a presentation here at the Denver Digital Summit, and my director of marketing was on. She's like, "Oh my God, is that you?" I was like, no. Like it might have been my Skid Row days, but no, my cat was all black, so no, absolutely not. So I get it. It's not the sexiest topic, but it's really, really incredibly important.
Right.
I cannot emphasize how important it is. And again, I'm not here to place blame, but it's just something that we generally always don't think about when we do a campaign, because it's kind of, and that's why I really just want to make sure that everyone gets this on that checklist to think about accessibility and how accessible is our email. Let me kind of put some numbers on it, because I know that marketers love numbers. Is that, you know, did you know that 15% of the world's population has some form of disability?
It's crazy.
And that's over 1 billion people. Okay. And then 330 million people are estimated to have some type of visual impairment worldwide. That's over 5% of the world's population. To put that in perspective, there's 325 million people that live in the United States. So if you're not thinking about it, you're potentially you're not communicating properly to every single subscriber.
Yeah.
And again, I get it. It's not the sexiest topic, but man, it has such an impact. Right. And when you think about it too, it can all come in all shapes and sizes. And one thing that I talk about too, it's not only permanent. Like think about it. Like my dad, when I was younger, I remember he played softball. I play softball now. And so I remember one day he came home, he slid into third base and broke both of his thumbs. He caught both corners, broke both of his thumbs. So if he did that today, how would he engage with his mobile device? Yeah. How would he engage with the computer? How would he type? So if you think about it, if you break an arm, what is that going to do? How are you going to engage with these things? So your most engaged subscriber, your highest engaged subscriber might not be able to communicate anymore, or might not be able to read the message that you guys have sent out. Yep. And I think that's something that's missing when people think about accessibility. It's like, oh, it's a permit, but it's not. It can happen to you and I, Jack. It can happen to me tomorrow, right? Like something could happen. You know, you look at like a good friend of ours in the industry recently had an issue happen. And so how can he engage now if you kind of have blurry vision, all that type of stuff? So right. And I just want to kind of show, when you think about blurry vision, like kind of some of those things from a visibility perspective. Here's an example, low acuity, right? This is a great email from eRoy. It's a digital agency out in Portland, and it's actually an interactive email, but you see that dot there in the middle? There's actually a plus sign, so you click on that, and then it shows more information. Now, if I have low acuity, I might not know that that's a dot. Right. Now, is there anything they could have done differently with this? Maybe. I mean, they could have used different contrast ratios, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's just more or less being mindful of it and being an understanding of like, hey, how, if someone had this, how would they engage? Right. And so you look at this one, ghosting, right? Jack, you might be saying, hey, this was me in college days, right? Like this is my night after drinking at the bars.
That's me now, buddy.
But no, to put all jokes aside, if someone, so what happens is we all have a dominant eye. Now with ghosting, when someone has ghosting, is both eyes are dominant. So then they start seeing these double, like they see this mirror effect.
Right.
Now, could clearly have done something differently? No, but again, it's being mindful of how would someone engage with it. Then you look at cataracts, common known, right? It's where you kind of see dots all over the place. So Xfinity,
Yep.
again, it's like, how do you play with that contrast ratio to make sure that someone that has some of these visual impairments will be able to see it and be able to engage with it? Now, with Xfinity, you might not want to get it anyway, but that's beside the point. And then you look at from someone with dyslexia. So here's a great example of what it's like for someone that has dyslexia. Like, just try to read that first sentence.
Wow.
It's incredibly difficult because the letters jump around. And so I don't know how many online here know someone with dyslexia, but talk to them, ask them about it. And I have some design tips that you could do to better improve how to engage with dyslexia. And then you look at from a color blindness perspective. The three main colors of color blindness are red, green, and blue, RGB.
Yep.
And if you think about it, here's a perfect example of someone that can't see green. How do they interpret an apple? Or if they can't see red, the apple almost looks rotten. And so a great example that I always use that's maybe relatable to someone or to some of the attendees is like, I don't know if you remember, Jack, about 10 years ago when Heinz did that experiment where they changed the color of ketchup from red to green.
Yes.
And it was a flop. Like, people couldn't stand it because they associate ketchup with red.
Yeah.
And it didn't taste any different. They didn't change the formula,
Sure.
but it was just the impression that they did. So if you think about that from a red perspective, it looks brown, right?
Yep.
Or green, it looks brown. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things that you guys got to think about when we go and do this. And now I'm going to get into some design tips that you can do to take that stuff into account. And when you think about, text alternative or image blocking, right? This is a great email from M&M's. I really like this email, but what they didn't do is they did not do a good job, not only on an image blocking perspective, but from an accessibility perspective. This would be incredibly hard for a screen reader to read, or for someone to interpret the email based on how the screen reader will read it. Because what happens is, and I'll just go to the next slide, is the code that's behind it. So here's kind of an example, right? So you have that image source, and then you have like the dimension, but then you have that alt text. And that alt text is what shows up with images turned off. That's what that alt text is there. But also from a screen reader perspective, it will read that alt text. Now, if that alt text is not there, it will read out the source. So it will go http://www.emailanaster.kickbox, it will read it out. It will be a terrible experience from that perspective. And so you always want to have an alt attribute. And this is such a quick win. Again, no impact on renderability.
Right.
And what it does, the screener will read that instead. Now, with this example, if you have a clear.gif or some type of image that doesn't really need any kind of description, maybe it's decorative, maybe it's a spacer, just put the alt text as blank there, that alt attribute blank, and the screener will skip right over it.
Yep.
Right over it. It won't even see it there. Okay. The next one, we talk about contrast ratio. So these are WCAG standards, and I'll kind of get some examples. But when you think about normal text and large text, so contrast ratio, when this ratios, you'll see 4.5 to 1 and 3 to 1. What it is, it's the color difference between the foreground color and the background color. And if the colors are the same, they'll be 1 to 1. If they're opposite, it'll be 21 to 1. So black and white will be 21 to 1. And so these are kind of the standards that they put on place. So for normal text, you want it to be 4.5 to 1. For large text, you want it 3 to 1. And so here are some examples of some of those numbers that you can put around it. So you see black and yellow, they're almost opposite. So they're 19.5. But then you look at, blue and orange. From a small text perspective, that will pass. But from a large text, that doesn't. You would think like, wow, there's a lot of contrast, but it actually doesn't. And I hope to God no one's using red on green, right? Or green on red, because those are very, very similar colors, 1.1 or 1.28 to 1. Those are almost.
They did like 15 years ago.
Yeah, yep. Right.
Holiday emails.
Yep. And the HTML, like the Navigator, what is it? Netscape Navigator, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. The end with the globe, with the planet going around it.
Yep.
But again, these are simple things. So you think about it from a color blindness perspective, or from a Acuity or ghosting or cataracts, this would be incredibly difficult for someone to read. And these are very simple things that people can do to enhance that side of things. And this is another thing I like to talk about too, is like clearly differentiate links. Okay, whether it's a button, whether it's you know, some type of differentiator that something's a link. Because if you think about it, whether it's underlined, if you so from a color blindness perspective, what's the default color of a link in HTML?
Blue?
Yep, absolutely. And what are the three colors of blindness? Blue, red, green, and blue.
So they won't see it.
If it's not underlined, if it's not bold, it's not italicized, it's not a button, they won't even see it. And so that's one thing. And I know underlines aren't sexy, they're not pretty. So that's why I just say clearly differentiate it, add italicize it, bold it, do something to separate it out from the other body of text. Now, if it's a button or whatever, it's already done that. You don't need to underline it. It's already clearly identified. So I just look at it, clearly differentiate your links. The next one we talk about dyslexia. Really try to avoid center line text, because here's the deal: is like when you have center line text, there's no justification, there's no border. So if these letters are jumping all around, there's no reference point to say, hey, where does the sentence start from? So I always suggest left aligning text. Now someone will say, okay, well, what's the right size? Like how much? And my recommendation is if you have more than 2 or 3 sentences, left align it. If it's one sentence or one word, right, it's okay to center align that. It's just when you have a paragraph of words like this, like this example, always left align it, because you look back at that dyslexia example, those were all left aligned, and you had a reference point.
Right.
But with this, because you don't have that reference point, it makes it incredibly difficult for them to read it.
That's great.
So that's kind of the accessibility side. So if you guys haven't, so like those of you that were, I think it was 38%, actually it was more like I think around 70%,
more than that. Yeah.
70% of people that don't really think about it. I hope this gives you guys some insight, some little key things that you can do that will have a drastic impact on those with some form of disability, whether it's permanent or temporary.
I'm assuming also that if they have questions after this, they could probably reach out to you or someone at Email and Asset, and you probably have additional examples and other resources for learning about this.
Yep, absolutely. It's a great point. We have a bunch of top blogs, and I'll kind of get at the end of this, we'll kind of talk about like a new product that we have that will walk everyone through all this stuff I just talked about without them having to know the standards. So,
so awesome.
Yeah. So again, whether you're using us or whatever, like please just consider accessibility, and please put it on your checklist for your next.
Yeah, and take a baby step. It's like everything else, everything can feel like a fire hose, right? When you're first kind of trying to grasp onto some of this stuff, and just start by going left align, and just incorporate a few things without getting overwhelmed. So I love this, and really applaud you for making it a point.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, I hope everyone else can kind of take it. Now, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to kind of go through these a little bit faster. But again, if people have questions, hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me on Twitter, or just shoot me an email, John at Email. So happy to answer any of your questions. So again, another one, link validation. This one's again really important when you think about like what's that experience. Again, these things are hidden, might not be think about. But you don't want them to go to 404 page, because you're missing that opportunity, because obviously email is a driver, it's not a conversion tool. You're driving people to someplace else,
right?
So you want to make sure like where you're driving them to, they can get to, right? Another thing that people don't really think about is, do those links work on mobile and tablets?
Right.
Now, a lot of bigger companies will have a different site for mobile and a different site for tablet based on the screen. It'll be like, let's just say like m.amex.com, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that link work on a mobile device just like it does with desktop? Because mobile device, you have to think about it. It's a mobile age. I think it's more than 55% of all opens are done on a mobile device now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're not thinking about it, you could be missing opportunities there as well.
Yeah, really important.
UTM codes, obviously, because email is a driver. Once they do that click, UTM codes, obviously in Google Analytics, we have the whole blog articles about how to set them up, but you want to make sure that you're tracking this all the way through, because through email, CRMs and all that stuff, all they can say is, hey, this person went to this point, but to follow that up, right? And to follow that up and say, hey, where did they go once they went to that point? Because outside of that, it's outside the purview of email.
Yep.
So you want to make sure that you can track that whole workflow and that whole progress of those individuals. Say, okay, we have an issue here at this point. Let's make adjustment here to better maximize the campaigns. Because again, email is a driver. It's not a conversion tool.
Love that.
And how do you track it all the way through? And then again, another one too is the kind of like domain blacklist. Huge when you think about deliverability. And what this is for those who don't know, that this kind of like IP blacklist and all that type of stuff, Google and all these other companies will actually track and say, hey, is this domain that you're linking to on a blacklist or is it malicious? And if it is, guess what? You're going to go in the spam folder. And you obviously don't want that. And so when you think about link shorteners and all that type of stuff, they're always listed on there unless they're a private link shortener. Don't use them. Just try to avoid that. Spell check, obviously I don't have much on this one, but spelling is a huge thing, right? Even when you have a process of, 2 or 3 reviewers, I was talking to someone not too long ago, and they said, we had 3 people review this content, and there's a financial company, and it was supposed to say ASK, like ask, but it said ass, and no one caught it.
Where were their minds, John? Where were their minds?
Where were their minds, right? But this stuff happens.
Oh yeah, happens all the time.
And then we get into obviously email previews, and this is the world that we live in. Again, I don't want to do a huge pitch on this. If you guys use us or whatever, I just have to use someone because every email client is different and they display emails differently. And it's incredibly important because again, you just open it up in a browser, Chrome. Oh, hey, it looks good. It's not the case because you're dealing with Outlook, Microsoft Outlook that uses Word to render an email. It's not very supportive in terms of HTML that it will render properly. And so I know we talked about a lot, but again, like there can be anxiety, right? As here's
a friendly
Johnny.
Face.
Like here's Johnny, right? There can be some anxiety and some fear, and that's really where we just want to kind of talk to everyone and kind of say, hey, like we understand it, but if you have processes like Jackie said, if you do list verification. And like a tool that we've just developed, we released back in October, all the stuff I talked about, we do that for you automatically. It's kind of like a TurboTax of email, walk you through each step and we'll make the corrections for you in your HTML. So from an accessibility standpoint, you don't need to know the standards. We do it for you. And we make those corrections and we give you the HTML at the end that you can then go and deploy through your campaign.
And I'm assuming that you guys offer a free trial, don't you?
We do.
Yeah, so if you haven't tried Email on Acid or you're using something else, wheel on over there and check it out. Again, we always offer this stuff, and I know Email on Acid does as well. No strings attached. Just give it a whirl. If you love it, awesome. If it works for you, great. If there's feedback, always let us know. That's very helpful as well. So I think we're very close to wrapping up, and we have a fair amount of questions, don't we, Brian?
We've got 3 for now.
Okay.
We could jump into, but one of them actually is relevant to what John just mentioned about the link validation. Somebody asks, what about the Gmails and Outlooks? Can they know if a user clicked a link if the email is read in the browser and the links are going direct to our site? Maybe they're asking about browsing, or if it's read in a browser. Right?
Yeah, like indirectly, I think they can because it's obviously on their platform. They can have listeners on like our people clicking on links within this. So just because it's not going through their platform when you click on it, like a tracking link, just because it doesn't go through, it doesn't mean they're not tracking it. And they also track how long is the email open for.
Awesome.
Yeah, they track a lot of things over there at Google.
Oh yeah,
Jacqueline,
they're not going to throw away data, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Brian.
Jack, somebody asks, can you give a definition of API, please, when we talk about API verification?
Yeah, so API is just a snippet of code. You can find it on our website in our documentation, but it's a snippet of code that you can add to virtually any form. And what that will allow is for a user, when they're entering in their email address in a form, it will simultaneously ping us. We'll verify that in milliseconds and determine whether or not that email address is accurate. If it's not, we then provide back webhooks that allow you to sort of communicate to your customer, for instance, maybe turn it red and say, gosh, doesn't seem like that's an accurate email address. Can you please re-enter it? We allow you guys obviously to control all of that experience, but the API just allows you to kind of stop. Typically it's fat fingering, it's people that are moving quickly. Maybe they're doing a reservation for something, and it just allows them to stop and correct it before it enters into your database. And why that's really important is not only for just delivering, but that can impact delivering a receipt. That can impact your loyalty programs, in terms of delivering points. Maybe it's a hotel type situation. So there's lots of reasons why that is a really handy tool. But all of it is explained, at least from our perspective. Just go to kickbox.com, click on our documentation, and all of the documentation is there. If in fact you have any questions, of course, you can always reach out to help@kickbox.com, and we'll walk you through all of that. But great question. Thank you. So I think maybe that is it for now. I know that as we wind up, first of all, again, just thank you on behalf of Kickbox and Email on Acid for joining us today. We really, truly appreciate it. We will be sending out a follow-up email with this webinar, so you can, watch it with the family and do whatever else you want to do with it. But seriously, in the event you had to leave, if there's somebody that you think could benefit from it. And as always, I know I'm speaking on behalf of John as well. If you have any questions at all, we are always welcome to receive those questions from you. Just ping us, and we'll do our best to answer those. Anything further, John?
No, just thank you guys so much. I was joyful to talk to you, Jack. I always appreciate the conversation.
Thank
you guys for having me, and thank you attendees for joining us.
Absolutely. That's it from Dallas and from Denver. And thanks again for joining us. We truly do appreciate it. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.